In this video, we'll look at remoting into a Windows Server VM running on Google Cloud Platform. We'll set up both a text-based remoting with SSH and a graphical remoting with RDP. Let's very quickly build out a diagram for what we're trying to achieve here to understand the objective. After that, we'll jump into the Google Cloud Console to set up our Windows VM and our clients. So on Google Cloud, we'll have a Windows VM running. This is going to be the Windows Server 2019 and specifically the data center version. Next, we need an RDP client. For this, we'll use open source Apache Guacamole. Finally, we need an SSH client. We'll use a cloud-based IDE, specifically the open source code server, to showcase the SSH connection. With the SSH client, we'll initiate connections to this compute engine VM and, again, have a text-based command line remoting experience. Once we've established that setup, we'll move on to the RDP graphical remoting experience. This will use a different client software, specifically Apache Guacamole. With the objectives clear, let's jump right into the Google Cloud Console and set up the VM that we need to showcase these connections. Within Compute Engine, we create a VM instance and, importantly, we change the boot disk. We're going to use Windows Server for the operating system, 2019 data center version. If you're following along and creating a test machine, remember to delete your instance after you experiment with these connection types. With this particular configuration, the VM will be $64 if you left it on for a month. However, it's just 9 cents hourly. So as long as we shut off the machine after we've used it, the total cost will be very low. You can also experiment with cheaper VM configurations. Let's go ahead and create this instance now. With the machine now created, we can use its IP to connect through SSH or RDP. Because RDP is pre-configured, let's first use that connection type. After that, we'll look at how to set up the open SSH server on the VM. First step for the RDP connection, we need a password for our demo user on this Windows VM. Next, let's open up Apache Guacamole and set up a new connection. We need 4 connection properties to connect to this instance. First, we need the external IP. If you choose to use only internal networking, the setup will be similar, but we'll use an internal IP instead of an external one. We're going to use the default port of 3389. We need the username and the password that we copied earlier. Lastly, we actually want to ignore the server certificate. If we were using a certificate that was verified by a valid certificate authority, we wouldn't need to disable that check. However, for this demo, we'll keep it simple and avoid certificate checks. Now we can click in and we'll get that graphical Windows VM remoting experience. Once the server manager is up, let's go ahead and search for features and apps. We'll want to add Open SSH Server to this list, and to do that, we can go to Optional Features, Add a Feature, and then scroll down to Open SSH Server. It may take some time for this feature to be installed. It looks like the Open SSH server is still installing, but we do have it listed down here, which suggests that it may be installed successfully. Let's check our services in order to see if it's registered here. Indeed, the Open SSH server is installed. If we go to the properties, we can set the startup type to automatic so that we'll consistently be able to use the service even if the VM restarts. Lastly, we're going to start the service. Now we're ready to connect. Let's switch over to our code server IDE and see how to connect to this Windows VM using SSH. We can see that the interface is now updated in the Windows settings. Open SSH server is installed and is no longer showing a progress bar. We need the IP to be able to connect. We're going to use a command format like this with the username and the IP. We're going to accept. And finally, put in the password. Now we're in the machine. Note that our SSH connection was initiated from a bash shell in the code server IDE system, but the Windows VM uses a command prompt system. The terminal system that we use to connect is different from the terminal system that we use inside the machine that we're connected to. As a last bonus step, let's look at how we might be able to debug this connection. We'll also look at the firewall that enables this connection. So first, let's look at the firewall. In the console, we go to the VPC network and then firewall. For the default network, where we installed this Windows virtual machine, we have ports 3389 and 22 enabled for ingress. That's from any target, so these two default firewall rules enable the RDP and SSH connections that we've showcased. If you're using a non-default network, you may need to add ingress firewall rules to enable the connections. These connections can be tricky to debug, so in Google Cloud Platform, we can actually use the connectivity tests feature to get a better understanding of where the connections may be failing. We'll create a test and simulate a connection through an external IP. We need a simulated public IP. And a destination port. We don't actually own this 8888 IP address. It's an IP address that's used for Google's public DNS service. However, it's an easy public IP address to remember and will work for our simulated connection. So let's create this connectivity test. After creating the connectivity test, it will automatically run and we can view results. If we didn't have that firewall rule allowing an RDP connection, we'd see a failure here and the specific firewall rule that was triggered. This can be really helpful for understanding where routes or where firewalls might be misconfigured and breaking a connection request. We can, of course, also run this connectivity test on port 22 to simulate a connection with SSH. And again, in this case, we see that the host is reachable on that port. This is as we expect and as we've proven. So just to recap, we used both Apache Guacamole and Code Server to connect to a Windows VM and remote into it. We use Guacamole for RDP. This is a great open source software which allows for browser-based RDP connections, but you can use any RDP client that you like. Then we looked at how to establish an SSH connection using Code Server. Like the RDP case, you can use any client that you'd like. In our bonus step, we actually looked at using the Network Intelligence Center to be able to test connections. So if we wanted to test, for example, an RDP connection between Guacamole and our Windows VM, we can simulate that and know exactly what's failing in our connections. Without these kind of debugging tools, if you're trying to connect directly, it can be difficult to understand where a connection may be failing. We hope this video has been helpful, and thank you for watching.